And we are back, and we just finished watching 1988's Akira, clocking in at 2 hours and 4 minutes. This is rated R and can be found on Funimation, or we actually saw it on Hulu, also by rent on Amazon. This is, I think, maybe the property that really put manga on the map here in the United States.
Yeah, I think so.
I think prior to this, I mean, manga existed obviously before this, but I think that this is what propelled its popularity here in the United States.
Yeah.
And the other interesting thing about this film is, this is again from 1988, so it's been a while, and watching the film now, you can see all the influences of this particular film from previous, I think, properties, and then thinking of the stuff that you watch now and how those properties have been really influenced by Akira.
Yeah, I mean,
it's kind of funny.
Yeah, like we were reading like that the Akira slide.
Yes,
that bike maneuver has been mimicked
to ad
death.
nauseum. Yeah. In either video games or other anime stuff, or even live action stuff.
Yeah. And I mean, even stuff like Stranger Things.
Sure.
A lab full of little kids experimented on with numbers tattooed on their hands.
Sure.
There's the influence right there.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like there's so much of this film that has seeped into the popular culture. And it's funny because so I remember seeing this in the theater, and if I remember right, this wasn't my choice. I went with a bunch of friends, and I thought it was just okay, I think, back in the day. I mean, I think I was more impressed by the whole thing about the animation. I don't think we had seen anything like that prior to this. So no, I think we were super just gobsmacked about that. But watching it now, years later, and again, not to take away from this, because again, this is a cultural milestone, because I think it definitely influenced other creators and other makers. Sometimes you want your stories to make sense. And not that this didn't make sense, but I found myself kind of bored.
You know, I could totally see that, but I don't feel it was much the story, to me the story made sense.
Did it?
Yeah, it's not a very complex story, to be honest. I mean, there's a bit of backstory that you have to really be paying attention to pick up on. I think my problem with it is the characters are very shallow.
Fair enough.
Fair enough. There's not much that you get to know about these characters, through just how they act with, or even interact with each other. I mean, usually when you have the hero, so you have Kaneda, you learn more about Kaneda as the story goes on.
And this is not a short film.
And it's not a short film. And it's not just that, he was sort of like Tetsuo's big brother. Mm-hmm. And that Tetsuo kind of resented him for always having to bail him out, and he wanted to prove that he was better or something like that.
Or he could be his own man.
And that's a pretty classic storyline. We've seen that done to death a million times. But in addition to showing us that storyline, they also give us aspects of those characters' personalities, and they endear us and charm us and make us care. And I feel like there was so much stuff going on, and plus you're just bombarded with just imagery. The eye candy. What you were talking about, how this was like a milestone sort of film, it's because when you look at typical Western animation and you look at this, this has a level of detail that I don't think anybody really experienced, at least on this side of the ocean.
Sure. For sure.
The mechanicals, the everything from Kaneda's motorcycle to the backgrounds when they're going through all the tunnels, everything has a level of detail that is just so fine and amazing that you can't believe that these things are animated by hand.
Right. This is pre-computer.
This is pre-computer. This is the 80s.
Right.
And probably even before. When did this come out?
88.
88. Okay,
and it probably took years to make.
Yeah, I mean, early 80s they probably started working on animating this movie, And I've seen the manga too, and the manga has the same level of
Detail.
extreme detail. This is amazing stuff, and you are sort of like awash in it suddenly.
Yeah.
And I feel like, and this is not only true of this, but I've noticed this in a lot of anime adaptations. It's sort of like, well, you're getting all of this, so we don't really have to go crazy with
On
the
the
character
story
development
or
making people's personalities more three-dimensional. A lot of anime, it's like, here's John, and he's the cool guy.
Yeah.
And this guy's the responsible guy. And this guy's the weird guy who's really good at tech for some reason.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's the girl.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah.
And we're not really veering that far off in this.
No, for
you
sure.
have cool guy Kaneda, sort of like, I want to be better, Tetsuo, and the girl,
Yeah.
who doesn't really have hardly any personality at all. And
Or
yet somehow,
any agency or
yeah, like what was her relationship with Ryu, the guy?
she told him to mind his business
Yeah,
about that. I was like, that's weird.
Mind your business,
Yeah.
and nothing real. I mean, maybe obviously they're trying to adapt into a 2-hour movie. What was it? 120
Episode
chapters,
manga.
however many volumes of
Yeah.
manga, and like 2 of them apparently didn't even make it into the movie because they came out after the movie came out.
Yeah.
So yeah, you got to cut some corners, but still, there's efficient ways of telling stories where you can get that stuff in there and let us know, and also give us a bit more charm to the characters,
meat
make
on the
us
bone.
care about them. I couldn't care less about Kei or Kai or
Yamagata.
Yamagata at least had some kind. He was like the gang tough guy.
Yeah.
But even there, it's just, okay, you're that archetype. But there's really nothing beyond that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And same thing with the general. I mean, did the general care about those weird little kids?
I don't know.
I got the impression sometimes he did,
and
but
sometimes
then
he didn't.
Sometimes he didn't. What about Oni, whatever, the doctor?
Yeah.
What about that rat-faced politician
Yeah.
who was feeding information to the? Was he just in it for himself, or was he actually trying to
Be helpful.
get these kids out?
Yeah.
There was a lot of stuff that was like
not really addressed.
not really addressed because these characters are such shallow archetypes that it kind of hurts the story. But once again, like I said, you are bombarded with like crazy visuals, explosions.
It's
there's
super
very
violent and
super
graphic.
violent. There's very little downtime where people are just talking.
Yeah.
Where there's like some exposition or anything like that. Usually, even when exposition's going on, it's like, oh, we're flying through space or riding on a motorcycle or dodging debris falling down us at 1,000 miles an hour. So yeah, this isn't like a storyteller's movie. This is a visual feast.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it is not something that you could say, if you had the book adaptation of this movie, just this movie, and I'm not talking about the manga, which may have a level of detail in it that could blow me away. I've never read it. But if you were just to adapt this movie in just a written form, you'd probably think that was like the dullest book ever.
Mm-hmm. I didn't hate it.
I didn't hate it either.
But I didn't love it.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because this has influenced so much that I found it just in my book. To me, it's funny because, and I know that so many people hate the big corporate Disney machine, but let's take a look at something like Pixar. Look at a movie like Up. In the first 15 minutes of that film, you get a gut punch.
Yeah. And you get to know those characters.
Right. And
that's just to be, you have an understanding of their personalities. You have an understanding of their relationships. You could see how they fell in love and the heartbreak that they went through in their life. And then at the very end, and that's just the first 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And then you learn even more about them as the story goes on.
Right.
I did not get that from this.
Right. So what I was going to say was, again, I know that people, and I know there's a lot of talk about how Pixar's kind of, their IP is not as great as it used to be. But in those stories, you really get a sense of a character. You really root for them. By the time that film is over, you've fallen in love with these characters.
Most of the time.
Most of the time. Okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
They've had some duds.
Sure. No. That's not, absolutely. But what I'm trying to allude to is that story to me is so important, because even if you don't have like the stunning visuals, you still have a story that resonates, that pulls people in, that tugs at the heartstrings, that leaves people thinking. And that to me is such good storytelling, because when it stays with you, right? When you consume something and it stays with you and you think about it, and you still talk about it years later. Look at a movie like Inside Out. It's about feelings.
Yeah.
It's about a young girl and her feelings. Like, if you told me that, like that shouldn't make sense. And yet when you sit and you watch that film, it's an experience.
Right. But the thing that helps that along, that keeps you engaged, is the characters and the fact that they are more than just, and that's like Inside Out's a great example, because they are supposed to just be feelings.
Right.
But you still get a sense that there's more there. There's it's sort of a funny way of saying it, but they're more three-dimensional.
Sure. No, but that's what I'm trying to say. It's that, to me, it's interesting that something like Akira, which is this huge milestone, this huge pop culture event that's influenced so much. I mean, you could even say it's influenced like those Fast and Furious movies, right? You could say it's influenced other anime. You could say it's influenced the look of music videos and fashion and this, that, and the other thing. And yet, to me, and again, this is just my opinion, like, listen, you don't have to, I'm not the gospel, right? I think as a viewer, you go, you consume, and you hopefully take away something from that experience, right? But to me, like, the story was so uninteresting and just and there was more of the visual spectacle here than there was of the story to me.
Like I said, I didn't really find the story boring or anything. I thought the story was interesting. I just thought that the characters that were carrying the story were not interesting enough. And to me, that's the problem. There was an interesting plot there. What
was the interesting plot? Tell me.
The interesting plot being that there's this group of kids or whatever that are being experimented on, and they're given these powers, and that one of them apparently was so powerful he ended up destroying a city and causing an entire nuclear war. And now they're trying to get past this. They're trying to move on and rebuild their society, but there's all of this inner turmoil going on. And somehow this stupid biker gang guy gets involved in this sort of craziness. Mm-hmm. It's sort of, that's sort of like the classic sort of like Spielberg thing where the little kids stumble upon the military base and like, oh my God, they got an alien. Let's save the alien. Yeah. It's roughly, there's no alien getting saved. They're trying to save their friend who turns into a freaking monster by the end.
Right.
Because that's his personality. He's like that sort of archetype. And that seemed interesting to me. The problem is that the characters themselves, they lacked any kind of charm. Nothing about those characters was memorable. Like, you ask me tell me about Kaneda. He's the leader.
He's got good hair.
Yeah. He's the leader. He's got the best motorcycle. Okay. What's he like? Does he say anything witty? Is he charming in any way? Is he smart? I don't recall anything like that.
I see kernels of, when they do the flashbacks, and they're not often in this film, but when they do the flashbacks where towards the end, where Kaneda's seeing all the stuff, where how he met Tetsuo, how they became friends and stuff like that. So there, I think you see glimpses of the story, right? How those two came together and stuff. You never get, it's never explained, or it's never shown why Tetsuo has such a dislike for Kaneda. Is it jealousy? Is it resentment? It's never explored. It just it just manifests itself, right? And to me, it was kind of weird because it's like this guy was basically his older brother. He always looked out for him to the point where he got into a fight that he had no skin in to get his toy back to then give to him. And this is how their friendship established itself, right? So you get glimmers of Kaneda, I think, and maybe just him. But Tetsuo, you don't really know anything about other than he's just consumed by this anger. And I wish they had gone more into that. I still felt like the story itself was blah. I think I kind of agree with something that you said before, that it's not a complex story, but because you're being bombarded by all these visuals, it sort of tricks you into thinking that there's more here. And listen, I'm not taking anything away, because in spite of what I think, this film has influenced so much. So much. Like I said, whether it's fashion or music videos or TV or movies, this film has been a precursor to a lot of other things. So I just think it's interesting that a property that to me is kind of just would have such an overreach. But here we are, right?
I think because, like we said, prior to this, there was nothing like it, at least on this side of the world.
Right. So is that what it is?
By virtue of being the first, it is the influence.
Right.
Because I think a lot of people, when they went and they saw it, and I'm sure it was a lot of young people.
Sure.
You know, let's be honest, they're not really looking for nuanced characters or anything. I mean, there's a reason why cartoons are simple. And this was just like, oh my God, this is amazing. Look at all this stuff. And like I said, they don't really care too much about the character. The characters can be shallow and stuff, but you know, as you get older, you're just you're looking for something a little bit more meaty. And I mean, like I said, this is not the relationship story between Tetsuo and Kaneda is not like a unique story.
No,
it's been done a lot.
Yeah.
And good versions of that, I mean, I can't really think of anything off the top of my head, but a good version of that, the characters themselves will be more interesting. And that is what really gets your emotions into that, because you care about the big brother who's, as far as he's concerned, has just always been looking out for the screw-up little brother.
Right.
And you care about the screw-up little brother because you see that he's conflicted in that he loves the big brother, but he's also extremely jealous
and
wants to be his own person. And not only that, but wants that respect, that to be like an equal to that person, not the little, don't rustle my hair or whatever.
Yeah.
And there have been a lot of stories where that has been conveyed more and shown a little bit more, and you see if they go the way where the little brother just completely descends into madness or evil, they show that happening, and you see the horror in the eyes of the older brother or anything or that, or sometimes things just get way out of hand and a third loved one gets caught in the crossfire.
Sure.
That sort of thing, it's been done very, very well. And the reason why that story has been done so many times is because we care. The story is built up in a way that lets us care about those two characters. And
here it just doesn't. Yeah.
It just doesn't. They remain their archetype, very simple, very shallow, which is fine for kids' entertainment. But like I said, as you get older, your tastes become a little bit more sophisticated. You want a bit more. Give some time to that. And there are ways you could do that where you could still have all the action and excitement.
Do you think that this property is specifically geared towards a certain age range? Because as adults, you and I don't think that we're the target audience here.
Yeah. I mean, I think most manga is and anime is they're targeting younger audiences. They're targeting teenagers and people like us in their early 20s and stuff like that.
So this wasn't made for us.
And honestly, the only thing, a lot of anime and stuff, when they say, "Oh, it's adult," it just means that there's more violence and sex in it. There's not really much in the way of actual story going on. But a lot of it is like that. A lot of it is people are surprised. It's like, oh, this is a movie. This is a real movie. The fact that it's animated and you can't get past that and you look down your nose at it, that annoys me, because there's tons of animated fare out there that is just brilliantly done. Anime,
Sure.
Western style. So many movies out there that are just great.
Yeah.
And
Not just
animated. Not just Pixar. Yeah. I mean, Spirited Away was fantastic.
Yeah. Wolfwalker.
Wolfwalkers.
We love that.
Spider-Verse,
which we're going to talk about as well.
Tons of Pixar stuff. A good amount of Disney's stuff.
Sure. Illumination. I would even put the first Despicable Me, which is, I think, a decent film.
Yeah, good stories, but like I think people
dismiss animation.
Just dismiss it because a lot of it, I would say the bulk of it, especially anime, it's like we're trying to target young boys especially. There's a reason why the most females have giant boobs in anime.
Terrible.
Hey, those are the guys who are slapping their money down.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because Kay in this isn't. She's
not sexualized at all.
At all. No.
Yeah.
She's just one of the boys.
No, there's very little sexualization going on in this. I mean, the girls they don't really play a major part.
I was gonna say they don't really exist here.
They're just sort of like, it's almost like they each have their own girlfriend, but they don't care about them.
No.
And the girls don't seem to even care about the boys.
Yeah.
The only thing that like approaches a...
Well, I don't know. I mean, I felt like Kaori's feelings for Tetsuo.
Kaori seemed to like Tetsuo. Genuinely like him and was genuinely distraught when he was gone.
Right.
Like when he...
And I think Tetsuo only cared about her when it was convenient for him.
Yeah, he liked that I think it was just like, I like that I got a girlfriend.
Kind of, yeah.
And I don't know.
Yeah. I just, again, I'm not downing the film because again, it's a huge milestone in pop culture. And it's funny because watching it, I think I said to you, like I could see Blade Runner in it. I could see
like
2001.
Cyberpunk is
clearly
extremely.
Yeah.
I mean, did Blade Runner come out before this though?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that vision of Cyberpunk was basically the idea of Cyberpunk and the visuals that we have, that era of time, the early 80s, that really set the tone, and especially Blade Runner. Yeah. And this definitely has that Blade Runner feel when they're showing those cityscapes with the giant holograms,
Neo Tokyo,
neon everywhere, just bridges and cars packed on top of each other.
Yeah,
the visuals on this are amazing.
Yeah, even for 1988. I mean, you would think that something that old wouldn't hold water, but it's still.
No, this is still beautiful.
Yeah, and again, just scratching my head like. This is all hand drawn. This is pre-computers, ladies and gentlemen. This is handmade.
Like when they show those like clouds of like tear gas billowing through those tunnels and stuff, that looks amazing.
Yeah.
Or just the debris. I mean, people are getting crushed under debris.
Yeah. Really well done. I mean, technically, just still a feast for the eyes, and beautiful in that respect. I just wish there was a little bit more to the story for me. Again. Just for me.
I wish there was just more to the characters.
Yeah. I mean, there's really nothing else to say here. What are your numbers, 1 to 10?
I'd give this a 6.
I'll give it a 7. I think from where it starts to where it ends, I think it's interesting. It's visually stunning. Again, just the whole idea of this being hand drawn in the 80s. To then premiere in 1988. Just looking at the influences either previous to this movie being released and then as a result of this movie being released, just all the things that have been influenced from this film. I think it's definitely worth a watch. If you love movies, I think you should watch it. If you're into animation, absolutely watch this. If you love manga, you should watch this. Yeah, I think... from that respect, it's interesting. I think it gets a high grade from me for the visuals and the historical context of it. Again, I wish the story was just a little bit meatier for me. But that's just my opinion. So you don't have to go by me. If you want to check it out, you can check it out on Hulu or Funimation or for buy rent on Amazon. And that's it from us, right? Yep. Anything else you want to add or?
Nope.
I like Spider-Verse, Across the Spider-Verse way more than this.
Yeah.
Like
you get more to the character.
Yeah.
Seriously, like I said, to me the story was fine, but you have to have characters that carry that story. If you don't care about the characters that much, even the best story in the world it's not going to matter because it's like I don't care if this person lives or dies. I don't really care why they. I mean, do you want to kill him or do you want to save him? Or it's just you're too shallow for me to care about.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you said that because I just thought of something about whether you want to kill them or save them. So Kaneda, his whole life, has been looking out for Tetsuo, and then at the end wants to kill him. So it's like it's an interesting about face for that character. And why did he want to kill him? Why didn't he think he could just save Tetsuo?
I think he wanted to kill him because he killed Yagamata.
Oh, right. I forgot about that. Yeah.
But
he knew Tetsuo longer than Yagamata.
He did, but then at the end, he didn't run away. He let himself be engulfed by the big flesh blob and get absorbed into the ball of light. So it seemed like he was still trying to save him.
Yeah.
I
guess familial, in this case, brother relationships are very tough. I was thinking about Onward. I don't know why.
Let's just wrap this up.
You don't want to continue discussing this?
No, I'm done.
All right. And that's it from us, and we will bid you all a
Tetsuo!
good night.
Good night.